Hi, I'm Laura,
I'm Deanne.
I'm Philippe.
and we are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett.
New book.
New book!
Yay, new book.
Book two.
And we're going to do the intro and then the first two chapters. I am so excited to be starting this book with you guys.
Yay.
All right, so part one is called The Vulgar Liar. And it has a little bit of intro text, which is, "My son, that thou mayest know when the head of a king is upon a plebeian and the head of a plebeian upon a king." And I wanted to talk to you guys first about, I want to first hear your overall impressions, and then I want to talk to you guys about some specifics.
Of these chapters, like our overall impressions of just starting the new book.
Yeah.
Philippe, you want to go?
Sure. I mean, we're in a whole different ball game already, so it's an interesting start. I was interested how the action starts off completely not having to do with Lymond at all, and then quickly realized, oh, of course it has something to do with Lymond. Duh. This is Dorothy Dunnett we're talking about. I already get Lymond imposter syndrome in the very first chapter, so I was happy about that. And other than that, there's just a lot of new people that I'm going to have to learn. I'm sure things are happening already at this point, because we've learned from last book that Dorothy Dunnett doesn't write something if it's not important. So I just don't know what's important and what isn't yet.
Yeah. I sort of enjoyed so it really contrasted with Game of Kings, because in Game of Kings it feels like Lymond is so desperately opposed to so many different factions, and there's so many different sort of things that are trying to take him down. And in these early chapters of this book, it just feels like he's got people and factions on his side. So like he's part of something instead of like fighting something. And I'm sure that there's going to be opposing forces. Obviously there's an opposing force that we don't know what it is, but we see in the beginning. But it just feels like he talks to Tom, and the Dowager Queen wants him to be part of this. And so it just feels like he has more connection to power structures so far. And so I find that an interesting and actually kind of refreshing change. So I'm interested to see how he navigates having possible support, although maybe not. We'll talk about when we get there.
No, it's super interesting because we're so used to him being an outlaw, and it's
right
now.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I first read this book, I was like, what is going on? Who are all these people? I was annoyed. I did not, I really wanted just like Game of Kings Part 2, because I loved Game of Kings so much. And so I was really like, why do I have to learn all ththese new people? What is going on? This book is so weird. And I didn't like it that much. And then the third book, you like slip right into it much more easily, and it just like boom. And so I liked the third book more at the time. Well, I still like the third book more, but I've come to really, really, really love this book. And this book, like once you read the whole series and then you come back to this book, it's an absolute treasure and it's wonderful. So I really, really love it. But I don't want to say too much because I will end up spoiling you, except that it's worth it. Keep going, even though it's kind of annoying at first.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny because you said that before we started reading it. And so I was actually expecting Lymond to get dropped into a completely unknown space with completely unknown people. And when it opened with the Dowager Queen, I was like, well, I know who she is. And then we went to Tom, and I'm like, well, I know who he is. I always felt like, I was like, no, I do know some of these people. So I didn't actually feel as like at sea as I could have, I guess.
It was nice to see.
Love the opening sentence. Because it's like, she wanted Crawford of Lymond, and I literally wrote, don't we all?
Yeah.
It was nice to see so many familiar names on the character list, even though it's mostly populated with names that I will never be able to pronounce correctly, so apologies in advance. I'm really sad Sibylla's not listed. Do we not see her at all in this book? I don't know. It's like, that's all we wanted at the end of last book, and she's not even on the character page. So that's a little upsetting, but who knows what's going to happen. We're still at the first chapter. So,
so on that note, part one, the vulgar liar. There's at least two meanings of the word vulgar that are relevant here, and liar is a homophone, so it's an instrument, but it's also the word liar. Vulgar, what does vulgar sort of mean, or could it mean, and what is the vulgar liar set up? Like, what do you kind of expect based on that section name?
Well, I'm assuming it's a play between common and obscene. So like, we've got like a common liar or an obscene liar, you know, and so wondering what, like, who is lying and what are they lying about, and I don't know.
And the sort of the vulgar instrument as well. And then we have that line that about the head of the king upon a plebeian and the head of a plebeian upon a king. Does that sort of suggest anything to you to look out for in this book?
Well, I wonder what the that is in that sentence. Like, I feel like it's a confusing sentence because it says, my son, that thou mayest know. Like, in other words, like, the purpose of this is that you will know what this thing, you know, when the head of the king is on a plebeian and the head of the plebeian is on a king, but we don't know what, like, why are they saying this, and what is the thing that is going to tell us what this, how we will know this. And so I don't know. I feel like a lot of these quotes, you just figure them out later. Like, they don't actually give you any, they're just confusing at this point, and then we'll figure out what they mean later.
Well, it's important, I think, to note that on the page of contents, there's a little line that says, the chapter headings are taken from the Brehon laws, the ancient laws and institutes of Ireland. The Senchus More itself was written in the 5th century AD. So, I mean, we saw the first book framed in chapters and titles all about chess. So we've got a different kind of framing story here and how she's titling the chapters. And I really don't know anything about that text, so it doesn't tell me anything yet. But the fact that it's from Ireland might have something to do with the fact that we're getting this party of Irish sort of nobility that's coming to France. So that could play big into the upcoming plot.
Nobility. France.
Also, the version of this book I had before, this is the new one, which is beautiful if you don't have it. But the old vintage one didn't say what the chapter headings were from, at least as far as I can remember. So I was just like, what is this? Bewildered. Okay. So then we start on our first section, the fork is chosen. And we've got our little intro passage about the cauldron being exempt from its boiling when the food, the fire, and the cauldron are properly arranged, but that the attendants, blah, 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 when he puts the fork in, the fork, I guess, is what causes the cauldron to boil. So I feel like we can sort of assume from this that the French court is the pot and Lymond is the fork. Anyway. And then D, you are right. Dorothy Dunnett always picks her first lines for a reason. This one is great. She wanted Crawford and Lymond. In addition to it being what everyone wants, probably after reading Game of Kings, what does this set up in terms of, like, does it make you expect any particular things? Does it make you expect a particular theme?
Well, I mean, there's so many ways that we can read that sentence. Like, how does she want Crawford of Lymond? You know, like, is this a desire for him? Is this we talked a little bit at the end of Game of Kings about use and, like, being how Crawford is used by others, and you know, does he use people? And so, like, how does Mary, the Dowager, like, how does she use people for her own ends, noble or altruistic as they may be? Like, we, you know, who knows? But she's going to use the tools that she has. And I love this little bit that sort of gives a little character synopsis of her that says, she rarely handed through the door what she could throw in by the cat's hole. And so I just get this image of this woman like chucking things through a tiny door. Instead of like opening the door and giving people something, she's gonna like chuck it through this small space. And just the idea that she's like, in some ways it kind of says she's not gonna go for the obvious route, and she's not gonna go for the easy broad stroke in the plan. She's gonna go for the sideways, small maneuver plan. So
I definitely when we talked about the end of Game of Kings, and I said I felt like this was like too much of a happy ending, and then like I felt that the first time I read it, and I don't feel that now. It is because that what seems like such a happy ending where the queen is like so all over him is actually leading up to this, which is like, oh, she wants him for her purposes.
Yeah, the whole thing about being steel, and like she had rusty weapons and she gave away the steel, and it's like, well, now she has the steel. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of ominous, because how is she going to use him?
Also notable here, Tom Erskine is now her chief privy counselor. And I found him interesting here, and their relationship interesting here. And one thing I thought was interesting is how much he dreads having to go talk to Lymond about this proposal. And it ends with Tom Erskine thought briefly that it would be pleasant to fall ill, to be unable to ride, to become deaf. And he says, it will be a pleasure, madam. So he's, playing the politics, but he really doesn't want to go talk to Lymond about this deal. Why do you think that he really doesn't want to go talk to Lymond about this?
I mean, it could be as simple, like there's lots of reasons, but Lymond was instrumental in the death of this woman that he loved. And so like, it could be as simple as that, is he just doesn't want to talk to the man. That's okay.
I doubt it's that, because it seemed like Tom was one of his advocates at the trial, and that Tom really saw him in a positive light. So I tend to think of it as more he expects Lymond to be like, hell no, how dare you even ask me.
There's also, when Lymond's around, things tend to get dramatic and confusing, and Tom gets embroiled in all sorts of intrigue and plotting. So,
which is a good point, because Tom is such a like solid, stable guy. He just must be like,
he doesn't want to deal with the drama.
He doesn't want to deal with all the drama. Yeah.
Lymond complicates his life.
Like Tom, he has this lovely bit where he's like, notoriously at some time, every faction in the kingdom had tried to buy Lymond's services, and just talking about how that extends to Europe as well. And so like everybody wants Lymond, the Dowager Queen, like, and he's got this task from the Dowager that he has to engage Lymond's services. And, if he doesn't think Lymond's going to do it, then here's this task that he has to do. Yeah.
I also like that, nor is the bidding restricted to Scotland or to statesmen or to men.
Or men.
Everybody wants Lymond.
Basically, Europe could go.
Yep.
Either a workshop or a playground.
And so before we move on from the section, we should talk a little bit about what she wants him for, which is she wants an observer who can provide her with intelligence, aka she wants a spy. So she basically wants Lymond to be her spy. And Tom, understandably, is kind of like, I don't want to go ask Lymond to be her spy, because he's probably going to be like, no, hell no, or he's going to cause drama.
Especially in France. Like,
you guys were right, by the way.
Yeah. I knew we were going to France. That was not
good guess.
I would have been super surprised if we ended up anywhere else.
All right. So we now are on chapter 1, Silent in the Boat. And so basically what happens here, an old poorly manned ship arrives in Dieppe carrying 3 Irishmen escorted by an archer of the Scottish Royal Guard. And for your
apparently French. Which I got so confused about, how the archers of the Scottish Royal Guard actually guard the French king.
Yes, this is your history lesson of the day.
Okay.
The French kings, French monarchy had a bodyguard that was composed of Scottish archers, as you do, as part of the Old Alliance, AULD alliance between Scotland and France. And Robin Stewart is one of them. And so what...
No relation to the other Stewarts.
Not that, maybe, not sure.
Well, he says they share the same surname. I would think he would say they were family, but that comes later.
But I mean, this is a little bit later in the later chapter, but if Lady Fleming is his mother-in-law and Christian Stewart's godmother, that would imply some connection, right?
It's not Robin Stewart's mother-in-law.
Oh, that's right. See, I'm already doing it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to keep track of.
He's Erskine's mother-in-law. There's too many Stewarts. Are the Stewarts all related, or are there just different branches of Stewarts and they're not?
There are so many people named Stewart that it is hard for me to imagine that they're all related. Maybe they're different sides of the bed or different branches of the family going way back. Who knows?
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to just give like a rough summary of the whole chapter, and we're going to talk actually about the characters. Because basically what happens is they're all on this boat. Another ship rams them. Liam tries to free the galley slaves, as does Robin Stewart, who's initially ashamed and then goes and helps. Peter Dooley also helps. Someone, we don't know who, shouts orders in French that actually save the boat. And Tatty Boy climbs up and cuts the sails free because they get stuck. So that's what happens. But the interesting bits is the character introduction. So we meet these 4 characters. And what I felt would be interesting, since there's not that much to say yet because we're just starting, is to get you guys' first impressions of these characters based on the way that they're introduced. And what is your best guesses of what role they're going to play in the story? So let's start out with, I guess, the first one we meet, which is Robin Stewart. What's your first impressions of him and any like expectations of what role he's going to play in the story?
He's super ambitious and pretty arrogant. And I don't know his role yet. Like, it depends on if he has a character arc that leads him to redemption or damnation. Like, is he going to be, because right now he doesn't seem all that great, but he could get caught up with Lymond and go like a Will Scott route and end up redeemed at the end.
I got Will Scott vibes off of him a little bit, just sort of like the sort of immaturity. I don't know if it was really much other than that, but as I was reading it, I was sort of like, is he the Will Scott of this story? Because Will Scott's not in that character list in the beginning either, so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so we'll see. Is he young? I didn't get the impression that he was young.
We don't know at this point.
Okay.
How old he is.
I just read it that way. I don't know why or where I got that, but in my head, I pictured like, he's a bodyguard. So I would imagine like after a certain age, you would stop being a bodyguard, but maybe not.
I don't think so, because the character who comes up later, who I just have completely, I left my notes on my other chair. Hang on. I moved chairs. Okay, so the other John Stewart. This is why, okay, who was John Stewart? There are too many Stewarts. All right. So John Stewart.
You're jumping ahead. Yes.
I know, but he retired from the same thing. So you could be in this thing.
He was in charge of it.
Yeah.
He was the captain of it.
He used to be in charge of it. Right. But I don't know.
So Robin Stewart had always been deeply interested in money and fame, and had always been convinced that skill and hard work would take you to the top. But he eventually concluded that that was not going to work, and that success in the world of intrigue is the way to the top instead. And so I think you guys got kind of...
Wait. I think the key to his character is the next lines, which say, a good many people seem to be more skillful than Robin Stewart. This was palpably impossible. So he starts to think about, well, they must be tricking their way up. So that to me is the key to his character, because he's like, oh, these other people seem so much better than me at this, but that's impossible because nobody could be better than me at this, so therefore they must have some sort of trick up their sleeve or something. And yeah, to me that's kind of the key of his character, is it's like nobody can be better than me.
But I think it's notable when the ship is rammed, what everybody does, and he freezes at first, and then when he realizes Liam is helping the galley slaves, he feels ashamed and he goes and also helps.
Yeah,
to me, that tells me that even though he's got this kind of unlikable money and fame thing, he also has some good qualities in him, some compassion that can be prompted, or shame that can then prompt compassion.
yeah.
All right, that's Robin Stewart. Philippe Oliamro.
Well, my little note at the bottom of this first page where we meet him says, does Robin have all of his information about the Irishman from the Irishman?
Why did you write that?
Because I'm like, how do we know what he's saying about this guy is true? Because he's giving us all these facts about this guy, and I'm like, well, if it's just the guy telling him all the facts, then we don't know anything. And then as soon as they said he was blonde, I was like, it's Lymond.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I've been conditioned, like, anytime there's a man with yellow hair or who's blonde or has pale hair or anything like that, I'm like, oh, it's Lymond. At some point, she's going to fool me and put in a character who's blonde, and I'm going to assume it's Lymond, and it's not going to be Lymond.
So tell me your impressions of Oliamro.
I mean, apart from he's Lymond at his finest. He's definitely putting on his airs for this one. I mean, the more and more ridiculous the character sort of got, the more I was sure that it was Lymond, especially, and I think what really clinched it was like, all right, I don't need to wait for the book to tell me explicitly this is Lymond. When he goes, well, the first thing he does is go for the galley slaves. I was like, that's exactly what Lymond would do. So.
Exactly. It's like, as soon as you knew that his first instinct was to save, that first of all, that he even thought that they were in trouble, gives you, yeah, exactly. It's again, I think playing this character, it's like the Spaniard, you know, we just get him having fun playing a crazy outlandish character, and having fun with the edges of that, you know, playing the extremes. So
all right. Tatty Boy Bala.
Is the Olive,
which is like a scholar, poet, professor in Ireland.
Which I'm assuming is going to have a lot of wordplay, because there was already a situation where somebody was talking about olives in the next chapter, the actual food. But I'm not entirely convinced whether he knows that Lymond is full of it or not. I think he actually thinks he's being hired by this actual person, Philippe Oliamro. I can't figure it out yet. There's not enough information, but
I literally read this section 3 times.
Yeah,
that's the question I was trying to answer. Like, was he hired by Lymond, not know? Like, was he hired by the character, thinking the character is real, the Irishman? Or does he know that the Irishman is Lymond? I don't think he knows. I think he thinks that the chieftain is a real character. Yeah. I mean,
that's the way I'm leaning currently as well.
But I don't know if that's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's part of the disguise if he doesn't know. So
I do think the servant knows, though.
I do too.
Peter Dooley.
100%. Yeah. Also,
Why?
I wonder if we know him. I feel like
thinking the same thing.
Yeah, like I feel like this is someone that we know. We just don't know who it is yet. So just because like Lymond has a fake name, and I feel like those two guys know each other, and I also feel like he would have pulled in somebody he trusted with him. And so I feel like maybe we should know who that is. But
so let's look at our character notes in terms of how she describes them, and maybe I want to get you guys' best guess on what role they're going to play in the story. So we don't actually get that much of Peter Dooley, which maybe is intentionally keeping something under the radar from us. We get him fitted into a recess like something doubtful on the underside of a leaf. And meanwhile, we got Tatty Boy, who is passed out drunk most of the journey. And we have a lot of sort of words for him: disillusioned, bitter, servile, alcoholic, slovenly.
Yeah. Was he, okay, here was a thing that I wasn't quite sure about. On page 12, he's talking about this learning to his job and how he became what he became. And he says, I was the 15th child and the nippiest, so why should I object to what my father and the Okafi might arrange, the 15th and the nippiest? And it sounds to me like his father sold him to this guy. Like that there was some sort of arrangement where he was the youngest kid, he was extra and perhaps a little bit of trouble. And so his father like gave him to this college or sold him to this guy for, I mean, or like he was an apprentice and his father was compensated for that. I don't know. It just seems super shady, and that he's bitter about, I don't know.
He's definitely bitter.
Yeah.
I like the description. In the dark-skinned, slothful, unshaven face, he thought he saw disillusionment, intelligence, the remains of high aspirations, perhaps all soaked and crumbled into servitude and cynicism.
Yeah.
Description. I will say, I don't think this is too spoilery. All of the characters in this are really interesting to me because they're all sort of potential directions Lymond could take with his life. And like once you see that in them, the book is more interesting than without. So telling you now, that's my personal interpretation of a lot of what we get in this book.
Yeah. I want this character to be redeemed. Like he's so bitter at the very beginning and has clearly had like hopes dashed over and over and over. And I want him to go on an adventure and have, like, I sort of want him to be caught up with Lymond and have some sort of valiant story. Like, I don't know if that will happen, but that's what I want right now.
And then in terms of, there's a great description of an olive, a professor, singer, poet, all in one, and he is an olive of the highest grade. And then we also have Oliamro. There's a note about Oliamro, one of the mightiest chieftains in English-occupied Ireland, except that it had never yet occurred to him to lead them anywhere.
It's such a good description. It's like he's got all this power, but he's kind of lazy about it, or it just never dawned on him to use it.
So why would Lymond play that kind of role?
Like politically or personally?
Just in general. Like he's had to make a choice about how he's going to go undercover. Why would he choose that? Sort of ridiculous, carefree, gregarious person.
He's so different from what he's able to be in his life. Like he's not carefree. He's not gregarious. You know, he isn't able to do those things. So to play a character that's somewhat carefree, like Lymond's full of cares, and so to play a character that's carefree, probably nice.
All right, so that's chapter 1. Now we go on to chapter 2. So we are going to meet even more characters, but before we do, we meet Lymond in his own form. And I love this, but anyway, sort of the high level here, Lymond meets up with Tom Erskine. He tells him he arrived on the Irish ship, that this is his disguise, is his way of reaching the French court inner circle. He reveals that they were rammed intentionally, a mystery, who would have rammed them. His arrangement with the Queen Dowager comes with no strings on either side. So this is a super weird arrangement where he doesn't have to tell her anything he finds out and she doesn't have to help him.
And I sort of feel like it's presented as an arrangement that's beneficial to Lymond, like he doesn't have to tell her anything and he's got all this freedom. But I feel like the undercurrent of that arrangement is super dangerous for Lymond because she has no obligation to him whatsoever. So if he gets screwed somewhere, like there's no support system, nobody's backing him up, you know, so.
Yeah. He also reveals that he's mostly there to have fun, but he does promise that if there's danger, he'll find it. Tom's on his way to Brussels to make a peace treaty, with which the Scottish would probably disapprove. Marie de Guise has brought all her most dangerous nobles with her from Scotland, including George and James Douglas.
Oh boy.
And many French do not approve of sending so much money to Scotland. So a lot of information in here that is potential clues about who could be maybe not on Marie de Guise's side, etc. So that's the literal plot, but the fun stuff is more in the little details.
Yeah. So on a superficial note, I loved on page 17 this little description of Lymond, where it was Lymond was masked, slender in black silk, the bright hair hidden by cap and cowl. He suited the room like a piece of blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he pulled off the mask and he had a mask on. To me, just Carrie Elwes is the Dread Pirate Roberts. It's like his cap and his mask, and he's, it's like, ta-da! But even though he's super sneaky. But
it's very sneaky. Well, and the first thing he does is he like, they're in this house. It's the La Pensée, the beautiful house of Jean Angot, late governor of the castle, who was like a privateer who, among other things, funded Verrazano, who helped find New York. But anyway, this house recurs in a later book, so a notable setting. But what I love in this house, it's got all these like Greek statues from Greek mythology, and so when Lymond comes in, he's on Clotho, who's one of the three fates, and his first lines are about sitting on Clotho's distaff and watching out for the scissors.
Yeah, and he's just waiting for death to cut his thread. I'm like, whoa.
Well, he's looking out. One of the benefits of a classical education, he knows to watch for the scissors.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of foreboding.
But so in terms of his entrance then, on Clotho, one of the fates, watching out for the scissors, and his first line as well, he says to Tom, "How delicate, love, shall we dally?" When he's masked and he's beautiful, what does this entrance kind of suggest of what we're going to see, what version of Lymond we're going to see in this book?
I mean, he's super flirty. Tom's just like, "Where are you? I can't see you." And he's like, "Oh, here I am." And sitting on Clotho. And it's just, he's very playful with this. And I feel like he's playful as the Irish chieftain. He's playful here. He's playful later. There's a scene later where he's sort of casual, and it's interesting. It feels very light, and that makes me nervous because I feel like that's not going to be the case for the whole book.
That wouldn't be much of a book, would it?
No.
He's also an artist of quiet movement. So we get the line artist, which we get again when he plays the spinet. He's musical, he's an artist, but also he's very professional and very sleek and very competent in the way that he gets in without Tom hearing him. Also, the mask is interesting. This is an interesting motif because he's in a mask as in his disguise, but he's also in a mask to see Tom. So this idea of him wearing masks is one of the recurring images in this book. Also, Clotho, one of the fates. So this book is about fate. It's what's Lymond's fate going to be? What's Lymond going to do with his life? And of course, the scissors, that risk looming over everything. And one of the last things he says, he talks about his intentions are purely frivolous, and he says, "Leave the orgies to me." Do you think his intentions really are purely frivolous?
No.
Why?
Not at all. I just think that's not Lymond. He's gonna have some sort of super serious purpose, probably multiple purposes. He probably just doesn't have a single purpose, but he's gonna hide it all with this light exterior, and he's gonna. I mean, we saw in the last book, he doesn't show his emotion, he doesn't show his true feeling, even when it would suit him, even when it would be wise, with Will Scott. If he had been more vulnerable emotionally with Will Scott earlier in the story, he could have averted a lot of problems. So we know Lymond isn't gonna He doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve. He's not going to go around showing that. So no, if he's sort of light and playful, there's definitely something else going on.
He suited the room like a piece of Ongo's Florentine silver. I like that line. He's like one of the pieces of art in the room. What else? Oh, this. He's talking about how he's going to find the danger, and he says the universities, the prisons, the boudoirs and the brothels, the palaces and the paintings, the serenades, the banquets, the lovemaking, the hoof and hair of a heretic frying, bed talk and knife talk and whip talk. I know where it breeds. If there's danger, I'll find it. So we have a little hint here of where he's going to be going. So this also kind of brings up his disguise again. He needs a disguise that will get him into all of those places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're super early in the book, so you probably won't have any guesses, but any guesses yet on who sort of set up this attack where this other ship rammed them?
No clue.
Yeah. No, but I appreciate that there is a clear mystery being set up, whereas in the last book, we didn't really know there was a mystery until about 3/4 of the way through. So, like, I'm going to be paying super attention and trying to figure it out. That's where my sort of path lies in this book, but I don't have anything yet.
I mean, I feel like our main suspects, like we do have suspects. We just don't have any indication of who has done what. But like our main suspects so far are going to be like Robin Stewart, although he's on the boat, so probably not him. That would be a death wish on his part. Somebody with the Queen, like, you know, George Douglas or James Douglas or somebody like that. I don't think it's Tom. Like that would be massively out of character for Tom. And then we have John Stewart, or maybe a agent of the King of France. I don't know. I mean, I think those are kind of our options, right?
Or maybe it's Andy Hunter.
I don't think it's Andy Hunter.
I don't think so either. But you never know.
I feel like the stakes are raised. I don't think it's Andy Hunter. But yeah. Or maybe the lady from the end of the second chapter, but I don't know.
Creepy lady. All right, we will keep going then. So we cut away with Lymond sneaking out. Tom sees the grim goddess suffer a flamboyant embrace. The shadows moved and the affronted fates were alone. So I also love this idea of fate. And I hadn't realized until we did the close reading of Game of Kings that fate is actually like the main player in Lymond's survival in that, because fate is what lets Will win the tarot game that saves Lymond. So fate has already been playing an active role in Lymond's success, and here it is again, being affronted with his flirtations. All right, next, what we have is another attempt on Oliamro's life. Someone sets his bed on fire, but he was sleeping in the loft with Peter, supposedly, whereas Taddy was passed out drunk. So they speculate who did it. Oliamro and Taddy have a long talk about who did it. They say probably not the English or the Irish. They also both know that the attack on the ship was intentional. And we get this clue. The fire was set by a man who was missing his right heel, according to Peter Dooley.
I mean, it's a clue, but what the hell does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
No clue. This is another reason why I think he knows Peter Dooley, is because, and that Peter Dooley perhaps has a name, like that perhaps we know Peter Dooley by a different name, is that he was sleeping with him. Like he knew him well enough to be vulnerable, like, because when you're sleeping, you can be attacked. And so the fact that he trusted this guy enough to be like, okay, we're going to sort of watch each other's backs here. Assuming they don't have another relationship, which you never know, but I'm assuming not. So I don't know. I just feel like maybe it's Will. No, I don't think it is.
If he dyed his hair.
No, I actually do want it to be Will, but I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
I think that's too nice and neat. And
I mean, it could be any one of the smaller named band that he was hanging out with in the last book.
Yeah.
But you never know.
So we also have that little exchange where sort of Tatty Boy and Oliamro talk about how a more quiet master would suit Tatty Boy better. And Tatty Boy asks if Oliamro is turning him out, and Oliamro says, of course not. What did you guys make of that exchange?
Where the one where he fell asleep, that one? Wait, where are you?
Bottom page 23.
Oliamro asks if he's regretting if he took the post.
I think Lymond is just testing his loyalties and seeing, where his interests lie. Kind of. He's prodding him. He's getting the shape of his character a little bit. Because for most of the 3 weeks he's been with him, he's been a drunken sot.
So why did Lymond bring this guy with him?
I don't know yet.
So
I think it's for...
idea. I think he says, when he says, would I live, he asks if he's turning him off, God save you, no. Would I live with one eye? It's no secret that I haven't a word of French, and my English sprains its elbow now and then in the rush. So what he's saying is his character, this Irish chieftain, doesn't speak French and doesn't speak English all that well. So he needs this guy who's like a scholar, professor, bard character to translate for him. Well, of course, Lymond speaks French and English quite well. So, but it's super useful as a spy to have everyone around you think that you don't speak French. Mm-hmm. So who knows what he can overhear, and people won't get nervous around him because it's like, oh, that guy doesn't speak French. So having somebody translate for him all the time, and he can test his character just by knowing if he translates correctly all the stuff around him. So it's, yeah. So I think that's why that guy's there.
Yeah, it's part of the disguise.
The smokescreen.
Why pick this bitter alcoholic?
Who knows?
If I'm correct, Lymond is actually impersonating a real person. So this is just somebody that has never actually met the real person. So it makes it easier. And that could be one of the reasons he used to pick him.
And Lymond kind of likes to save people, I think. I think he, I mean, you think about how he treated his men, in the band. It was like at the end of his time with them, it was like, okay, now you guys know how to do stuff. Like, go off and be, regular. So I could see him like picking up some down on his luck, bitter guy and be like, all right, come with me, All
right. So next up, they're sort of flattered that a court dignitary is coming to visit them. Supposedly not realizing that the actual appearance of this court dignitary is because there's an emergency, which is their appearance and manners, because their clothes and their manners are terrible, and it's unacceptable in the French court. So this is where we meet John Stewart's Albany. And what are you guys' impressions of John Stewart's Albany?
Well, he's brothers to Matthew Stewart, Earl of Lennox, so I immediately don't trust him. There's all sorts of stuff brought up about the Earl of Lennox. We get a lot more of his backstory about what he did with France, just rehashing what we already know about him. Of course, Margaret comes up, and that never leads to good places. Mm-hmm. So I am not really trusting him yet at all.
No. And it also says explicitly, I mean, the narrator tells us, who knows how reliable that is, but the narrator says he was not quick-witted. It doesn't necessarily mean he's stupid. Like, it just means he's not quick. But, Lymond's super quick. So it's an interesting contrast. And Lymond is just, this whole scene is funny because he's just pushing this like uncouth messed up character, and like we know that Lymond is so fastidious about like the way he looks, and he's very careful to be neat and put together, and this guy's like the opposite of that, and to the point where he's annoying to this So it's just funny to see Lymond play this like seems to be kind of slovenly character.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and in terms of like everybody's mocking everyone else in this scene. So John Stewart Albany brings these two young noblemen with him, and they're mocking Liam but Liam is mocking them back. And Taddy's being sarcastic, bitter, and sulky, and he actually makes them laugh. He makes a line about the Prince of Barrow is as consequential and scholarly a man as you would be hard put to it to see in a city, and I'm not saying so for the pay he gives me, for you would quarter yourself looking for it. Did you drop it from between your finger and thumb on a white sheet at midday itself? Yeah. And that causes an explosion from the young men, while Lord Daubeny grimly persevered. So Daubeny has no sense of humor, but these court dignitaries who bow 3 times and are just
that apparently like smell great and
and Liam Rose making fun of them for smelling so great, and they of course think he's uncouth for not smelling great.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then we get a little bit of an intro to the French court here. John Stewart Albany introduces them. Henri, who's the king, Catherine, who's the queen. They have 5 children. Daubeny leaves out a bunch of stuff like the queen and Henri's mistress, Diane de Poitiers. They don't get along, and the constable is on one side, and nobody trusts the de Guises, and this is important. Nobody trusts the de Guises. Marie de Guise, Mary, Queen of Scots' mother, is a de Guise, so she's not just the Dowager Queen of Scotland. She's the oldest member. She's the oldest sibling in this most incredibly powerful and untrustworthy family in France.
But the king trusts them, right?
The king trusts them, yes.
The king trusts them because they're like the families in like the highest positions all around.
The king's love and most of his higher offices apportioned between them. So everybody else doesn't like them because they have less power.
That makes sense.
Just point of note, Henry and Diane. Henry's the one that made the brooch for Diane that heavily featured last book, correct?
Yeah, actually, if you go to the Louvre, some of the rooms in the Louvre have the Henri and Diane, that it's like an H and a D together, which is what was also on the brooch. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I went with a Lymond fan group to Paris, and so we're looking for the Henri and Diane like symbol everywhere.
Okay.
Yep. The father, Henri's father, Francois I, was his like motif was a salamander, and you still see that all over in France also. And that's in the first chapter, like Liam Rose steps on it.
They mentioned.
Right. So, and I love also the sort of reaction where like John Stewart is trying to like politely explain, like, you know, the king sets the style and it's customary to follow it. If you would like a recommendation of a tailor, I'm happy to help.
You can dress up a little bit more than you are.
And Liam Rose just like, that's ridiculous.
Whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we meet.
All right, we meet the Irish party, yes. So we are about to meet Madame Boyle and Una O'Dwyer. So I guess Madame Boyle first, and she shows up first. What are your impressions of her?
I almost assumed at first that this was another person in Lymond's past that knows it's Lymond. That was my initial thought, but I don't really think so anymore. She really is somebody that actually knows Liam Rowe, but has never met him, so she knows of him.
Right.
So at first I thought, oh, maybe this is like a contact that Lymond had set up beforehand, or that, you know, I thought she was in on it, but I don't think so anymore as the chapter progressed. So
yeah, and it seemed a little bit like Lymond was a little bit disconcerted, and maybe, you know, the intervening of fate that this woman's never met the real guy, the real Liam Rowe, because I'm guessing it doesn't look like Lymond. Yeah, I'm actually more intrigued by, is it Una O'Dwyer?
I was gonna get to her next. I just wanted to look Madame Boyle first.
This woman seems, Madame Boyle, she seems kind of brash, and she's like loud and screechy and I don't know.
So there's a really interesting set of descriptions about her that always made me like, I always had a sort of uncomfortable feeling about her and I didn't know why, but when I look back and read this, I completely get why, because the words Dunnett uses to describe her are really kind of contradictory. So she's got, her mouth is packed with teeth. She's got caterpillar heaped hair, square neck, weather-beaten face, broad hands, and her voice is high as a bat's. She's jolly, and most of her dialogue, she screams.
Yeah,
she's a really weird set of traits.
Yeah, she's very odd, and she seems like, I don't know. It seems odd that she's like known by these sort of French people who are trying to be like super fancy and whatever, because she seems not.
But like, she's so jolly and personable, and John Stewart has like a very positive, opinion of her. She knows how to play the game at least.
Yeah.
And then we meet her niece Una, who she's trying to get married to a French, court guy.
As you do.
Of course.
I wasn't going to marry a French guy. I'm available.
You don't speak any French.
Yeah.
Un peu.
All right. So, what are your impressions of Una?
I think we're going to be seeing a lot of her. I just get that feeling that she is going to take on the same role as Kristen Stewart, but not the same personality at all. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced. I don't know if she's going to be good or bad. Like, I don't feel like we have a sense of her character yet at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see.
She's definitely mysterious. Like, there's just a little bit of an introduction, and she seems very interested in what's going on, and also sort of at the end of the chapter just sort of slinks away as well once she's gotten the information, because they have that little talk about Liam Rowe after he leaves the room.
Mm-hmm. Well, she pretty much storms out. Why do you think she does that?
Yeah, she says she turns on her heel and walks out of the room, which is like a,
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. She thinks, she's got a bad opinion of Liam Rowe, and the way that he was talked about right before she walked out of the room was that he was just kind of on vacation and trying to like scam a vacation off of people. So he wants to treat himself to a small private survey on how the rich live, and it paid for by somebody else. And she's just like, ugh, and walks out of the room. So I feel like she might have like nationalistic feeling about Ireland, wanting to kick the English out, get the English out of Ireland, which, that would be good, because, they were not so great to
well, have some parallels with Scotland also.
Yeah. Yeah. Apologies to the English who are watching this, but not so good.
It's all ancient history. Well, not so ancient, but.
I was curious where at one point it calls her Una O'Dwyer of Thady or Thady, depending on the H's, on the top of page 34. And I'm like, that's the same name as the bard, who's Thady Boy. So like,
she's asking him. She's asking Taddy Boy. She asked him.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Oh.
Giving her a title and a place statement. I'm like, why is that the same?
No, she's asking him. Yeah. So there's a lot. I sort of, even though she's not in this for very long, there's a lot that stands out here. Obviously, she's beautiful. She makes men dumb by her presence, and she's still young. She's not shy. She's dark and neat boned, black hair. She's wearing dark blue and no jewels. And both men are struck by her. She has a calm gaze. She's contemptuous. She's suspicious. She's digging for information with the questions she asks. And she speaks to them in Gaelic, so she's also kind of challenging them, which again, she's suspicious.
Yeah.
She's silent as a cat, which has parallels with Lymond, who's often described as a cat. She spoke like an ancient goddess in her black hair. What does that like imply? That's such an evocative phrase.
Yeah, I mean, it just implies knowledge, wisdom, maybe, but just like this presence.
I think also dignity, pride, strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot going on in terms of not that many scenes, but or not many things, but really evocative descriptions of her.
Yeah. I also feel like I want to keep a running total of how many languages Lymond speaks.
I don't think he speaks Gaelic here, but he understands
enough to reply. So like he understands what she said and then replies in English, but he knows enough to know exactly what she said. So it's interesting. But I wonder if he thinks his accent would give him away. Like he could speak it, but not speak it with a native accent, and so reply in English. I don't know.
So given that kind of what happens in this scene is that there's basically interrogation of the Irish party, asking them tons and tons of questions. Do you think that Una and or Mistress Boyle knows?
They may have a suspicion that something is off.
Yeah. I don't think they're, at this point, I don't feel like they've like know exactly what's going on and they've been sent here as some sort of like plot to thwart Lymond in any way. But I think it's completely reasonable that they're like, who are these shady guys? And
I mean, there's also the chance that Lady Boyle, Teresa Boyle, I think was her first name. There's also a chance that she really does know who the real Oleum Rowe is, and she's completely leading them on.
Yeah.
To try and see what purpose Lymond is serving in impersonating this real person. So I don't think she knows he's Lymond, but
right.
She might know he's an imposter.
And if at the end of the chapter Una is mad about Oleum Rowe being this like hanger on who's gonna like scam a vacation out of people and then go home and not do anything, I mean that implies that she believes the cover, and that if she stormed out of the room because they're talking about like what a lazy bum this guy is, then she believes the cover and she's storming out. Or it could be just, you know, he's not who he says he is and she storms out of the room. So I don't know. I think we're meant to think that she buys the cover and is storming off because he's lazy, but I don't know if I trust that that's true.
I will say there's a ton of clues in here. Teresa Boyle's interrogating them. They talk about how long Taddy Boy's been with Oleum Rowe. Then basically what happens is Albany and Oleum Rowe leave, and that leaves us behind Una, Mistress Boyle, Robin, Stewart, and Taddy Boy, and they gossip about Oleum Rowe. They talk about him not having any interest in women, him being queer, meaning like weird. He doesn't mind being laughed at if he can laugh first, but he has a brain. And yeah, he's there for a survey of how the rich live, paid for by someone else. Mm-hmm. Any other things that stood out to you in this chapter? There's, like I said, so many clues.
Like also, just to go back to that interrogation, like it would make sense that Taddy Boy isn't able to give a good description of Oleum Rowe if the story is that he hasn't been with him for very long. So, and he didn't know him before. So any like response that he has to this interrogation could probably be believable just by, I've only known him for a few weeks kind of thing. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, we're so early in the book.
We are. All right, so any other observations on this chapter, and then any guesses about what's going to happen next or things that you want to see happen next?
I'm interested to see how long Lymond can keep up the appearances of being this person. Like, I eventually feel like certain people are going to find out. We already know that the Douglases and John Maxwell are here with Mary de Guise. So obviously, if they see him as Oleum Rowe, they know what Lymond looks like. And I don't think he's gone to great lengths to disguise his facial appearance. So that'll be interesting to me.
Good disguise.
Yeah. I mean, like, has he done anything to age himself? I mean, she's definitely grown out his whiskers. They make mention of that quite a lot. So he's got facial hair going on right now. but you can always tell. Like facial hair doesn't really change a person's appearance that much. Yeah, so I'm interested to see how long he can keep it up and who finds out what and where that leads in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like who's privy to the knowledge and who's not.
Yeah. And I feel like we've got some groups of people that I'm intrigued to see how these groups of people interact. Like, so we've got, I mean, just in the power structure, we've got the king, the queen, and the mistress. Like that's kind of a group. And then we've got like the dowager queen and the people, the men that she's brought with her, these like the shady guys from Scotland who, you know, were risky. And then we've got like Tom Erskine's family. So his, I hope I have this right, his mother-in-law is like governess to the young queen. So his wife, Margaret, her mother, Jenny Fleming, and then there's some kids. So like, I think his brother's around and there's some kids that are playing with the queen. So there's that whole group of people that are around the court as well. And then we've got the people that we've met in these chapters. So Lymond and his two guys, Madame Boyle and Una, and then Robin and John. And so we've got lots of like,
yeah.
Can you show our audience your little notes where you made like a chart of all the characters?
So here are my character charts. I've got like names and notes on them. And then I have, I've tried to put like the place where people are, and it's like where they move to. Like I'm trying to keep track of like who's with who. Because I got so frustrated with the last book where I was like, what castle are we at? And like, who lives there? Where are we going? I was annoyed at not being able to know that stuff. So I'm trying to keep a set of notes of who belongs to who. And
Dee, you're totally going to be the one that figures whatever mystery this book is all about out.
I don't think so, because I need this because I don't see patterns the way you see patterns. Like you're able to figure out patterns and I'm not very good at that. So I need help.
Well, I don't have nearly enough information yet to figure anything out, but I will be working on who's trying to sabotage either Lymond because they know it's Lymond or Oliamro because they don't want him there. And I don't know what the deal is yet. Like it's way too early to know anything, I think, unless it's there and I just missed it. But I do
feel like that we can say that the attack on the ship was definitely an attack on Lymond's party, because then we had a later, more intimate attack in the fire. So yes. I think that is something that we can say mostly for sure.
But I don't know if they're attacking him because they know he's Lymond or because they're attacking Oliamro.
Right, because it could also be an attack on the Irish for reasons related to that political situation. They've got all these personalities and all these politics. We don't know if this is political. We don't know if this is personal. We don't know if this is against Oliamro. We don't know if this is against Lymond. We don't know if it's something else.
And I'm going to keep my eye out for anybody that doesn't have a right foot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or right heel, if they have like the shoe. Like, oh, my right heel is broken. I'll be like, that's a little obvious.
I understand someone not having a right foot, like having an amputation or something, and having like a crutch or something, but I don't understand what not having, like, is he walking on his tiptoes just on his right foot all the time?
Yeah. What is So this book, like, this is why it was a little overwhelming for me at first. This is a book full of the ridiculous, basically, and you just kind of got to go with the flow and enjoy the carnival atmosphere.
Fun.
I will say there's another mystery that you guys didn't find yet, but the clues are there if you look. Just saying.
Okay. It will pop up. We'll figure it out at some point.
You will. Don't worry. And I didn't figure it out when I first read it either. Any final questions or comments on this chapter?
Just looking forward to seeing where this one goes.
There it goes.
So, before we wrap, we want to share with our audience that our friend Kevin made us a theme song. He's never read these books, but he sent this to us as a surprise and it cracked us up. So we hope you will enjoy it as much as we did. We certainly made my week. Yeah. And thank you all for watching, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Yep.
Lymond is the place where our story is told, with kings and queens and knights of old. Another Scottish story with drama and war, immersed again like Sleep No More. Dorothy Dunnett's gonna take you on a ride. This Chronicles book club's gonna blow your mind. So sit right down and take a peek with Lord